Hola a todas y todos, estamos muy contentas de empezar con una serie de entrevistas en el marco del desarrollo de nuestro núcleo de estudios interdisciplinarios en trabajo social de la Universidad de Chile. Tenemos hoy día el agrado de contar con la visita del profesor Vasilios Ioakimidis de la Universidad de Essex, quien está acá en nuestro país visitándonos en el marco del proyecto Horizontes Políticos del Trabajo Social. Estamos muy contentos de estar con él esta tarde. Hello Vasilios, how are you? Well, I have three questions for you. The first one is if you can introduce yourself and perhaps let us know why did you decide to study social work and what are you doing today?
Yeah. First of all, it's really great honor to be here, to be visiting the University of Chile, well-known historic university. With regards to your question, I qualified as a social worker. I studied in Greece. I'm originally from Athens, and I studied at the School of Social Work in Patras. And then I moved into the UK to do my PhD, and this is where I stayed for the subsequent many years. This is where I still am. Now, as a student in Greece, I remember one of my questions always to my professors would be around the history of social work, why social work has developed as a distinct profession, and what is its relationship with the political context, the different political context. You know, when social work in Greece developed, it was a very contentious period. So I wanted to know why, and this led me into actually doing a PhD around this question at the University of Liverpool, which at the time was really the hotbed of social work radicalism in the UK. So it was a very intellectually and politically stimulating environment. At the moment, I'm the founding professor of social work at the University of Essex, which is another actually university with a long history of political activism and still retains some elements of this political identity, where I lead on the Center for Social Work and Social Justice. And as part of this center, we provide undergraduate, postgraduate, and PhD level education. One of the main areas that has captured my attention, both in terms of research and politics, has been the importance of international knowledge transfer and internationalism as both an act of political intervention and an academic discipline. And this really led me into joining the International Federation of Social Workers, where at the moment I'm chairing the Global Education Commission. And I have also been, since actually I was a PhD student, a member of the Social Work Action Network, which is an activist radical organization in the United Kingdom.
Very interesting, everything. And from all these roles that you occupy today, I would like to ask you, what is your view about social work? What is your approach?
Well, this question sounds simple, but I think it's one of the most complex questions a social work practitioner or a social work academic can be asked about. And sometimes it's easier to start answering this question by saying what my approach to social work should not be about. And I think social work, just because of the very particular and very unique position it occupies in society, in modern societies, which is really the point where state policies interact with some of the most vulnerable and the poorest people in society, we should always be politically minded. So social work should not be apolitical. It cannot be neutral anyway, because when social workers are invited to or expected to implement state policies, immediately they engage with very specific political choices. So social work should also not be purely technocratic profession. Social workers cannot work as technicians. You know, we need to understand the context that brings people into social services, brings people into asking for support or being forced, because very often they're involuntarily engaged with social services. Social work should not be patriarchal, a profession that oppresses women. Actually, we're a gender profession anyway, and very often it is very common in many countries to see women that are a majority of the profession working in frontline positions, in insecure working conditions, and then have all the managers are men. Social work epistemology should not really be positivistic as well. You know, we're dealing with the messiness of life, the unpredictability of people's lives, and this cannot really be understood by adopting and transferring epistemologies of positivistic approaches that have been used to interpret the laws of nature. Because thankfully, human beings, as I said, they're the agents of change, the messy and unpredictable, and this needs to be captured epistemologically. So what social work should be about then? I think broadly speaking, we should be, as a profession, committed to social justice and human rights. And within this context, there's a big discussion to be held, especially even within the critical and radical social work tradition. Very different approaches, very diverse approaches, and this is a very welcome discussion. Another characteristic of the social work approach we propose at the University of Essex and the Social Work Action Network is also our focus, our faith really, on the ability of individuals to change both their individual circumstances and help contribute change societies. So we are optimistic, have faith and hope on the ability of creating better societies, and social work can really contribute towards this direction through the experience, the expertise, the evidence, and the inclusion of the people we work with in the design of this process. I could be talking for hours about this, but roughly this is really the context of what social work.
Well, the last question is about what is your view about teaching and researching in social work today in this context?
Exactly, yeah. I think it is very important. We keep referring to critical and radical social work, and unfortunately in many disciplines very often one can see a discrepancy between rhetoric and practice in social work. In university education, so very often you might have academics who preach progressive values and then they don't really practice them in the classroom. So I think it's a very critical question. How can we encourage an education that is based on principles of critical theory and critical approaches? I think there are two aspects here. The first one is that we should not treat students, social work students, as Paulo Freire would say, empty bottles. Now students, they come to the university and they don't have knowledge, experience, ideas, and the job of the educator is to fill this empty bottle with knowledge. No, this is not how it works, I think. Our students come to the university with very important life experience and knowledge. And actually in social work in the United Kingdom, many of our students are mature students, with working class backgrounds, that only manage to get into the education at a later stage in their lives than others. And these students, it's very important to empower them and feel confident about their life experience and try to make sense of this life experience and in a collaborative way share it with other students. So as we said, people are agents of change in their own lives. The same should happen with students, should be agents of change within the education setting. So this is the first very important principle, that it shouldn't be a top-down process. You know, very often as academics learn from our students, you know, is a synthesis. Now the second one, and I hope that it doesn't sound like a paradox, is that education sometimes can be an unsettling experience. So we don't try to create comfort zones for our students. We want to empower them to start this journey of learning, but the journey of learning can be a tough one, a difficult one, that encourages students, especially in social work, to confront their own stereotypes, challenge them, change them. And very often this is a very powerful, transformative practice that can be very unsettling, and students can feel uncomfortable. So in contrast to what the commercial approaches in education and the modern privatized universities might expect, it is very important that we create safety zones for our students, but no comfort zones. They have the space to challenge ideas, even their own ideas, discourses, and try to co-create knowledge. And I think more or less the same principles should be incorporated into researching for social work. I think historically there's a problem with social work. In many countries it has been seen very much as anti-intellectual profession, and this goes back to the history of social work, where the focus has always been on practice, and theory and research were almost demonized. And in my view, you cannot really have theory without practice, or practice without theory. So we need, through research, to bring those two elements together, and learn and develop practice that is research informed and theory informed, and vice versa. And I use the term research informed and not evidence based.
Yes.
Which is a very common theme in academia, mainstream academia. Because very often evidence based approach, first of all, it implies that all the research we have done before the so-called evidence-based was not really based on evidence, which is nonsense. I mean, academia has always been focusing on evidence and research. But very often, evidence-based approaches to social work, research and theory focus on the process, but they neglect asking the right questions. So they focus on what works, but they don't ask why and how.
Exactly.
So I think for social work research, the important thing is to be able to, as a first step, ask the big, bold, important, crucial questions. And once we're able to articulate these questions, then we'll find the right, appropriate methodologies to generate evidence. And in my view, these methodologies, again, cannot be positivistic, as we said before, because of the messiness and predictability of people's lives and the very diverse experience of people. So asking the right questions and then creating appropriate methodologies that empathetic, they are creative, they are participatory, so they include the views of the people we work with, and they're not top-down, and they also have an action orientation. So ask the right questions, devise and co-design the appropriate methodologies, and then do something action-oriented in order to make this world a better place. So that's my approach to research.
Thank you. And an additional question is, you have been here for a few days, and you have known Chile a little bit, Santiago, to be more precise. What is your message for students and colleagues and academics in social work from Chile? Do you have something that you would like to share with them, a message?
So this trip has been an eye-opening experience for me, because I think that no matter how much preparation can one do? And reading about the political context here, there's nothing really to prepare you for the experience social workers, academics and professionals have had in this country. I mean, we're talking, and behind us we have the posters of the campaign to reintroduce, re-establish the social work program here, because as your audience and your colleagues know better than anyone else, social work education was suspended and deemed as dangerous during the dictatorship years. So, first of all, this experience has been really empowering and important to me. Now, the message to colleagues would be try to record this experience, this history, write about this, speak about this, cherish, learn, but also help us to learn from your experience. And internationalization and internationalism is very important here, and I think social work colleagues in Europe, in North America, in Africa, all over the world would really welcome learning more about your unique and very, very important experience. And the other very important thing is be confident with the work you're doing here. As I said, has a very specific historical and cultural evolution. Try to develop it further, share, co-create, and share with the rest of the world. And I look forward to really be working with all colleagues again in the future.
Thank you very much for your words, and we will miss you when you leave. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the invite.